Hey, well, what's up, guys? Welcome back to The Collision. Daniel here to talk about the new film Gran Turismo, a movie that teaches us that the best way to pursue your dreams is to play hours and hours of video games. I've seen it, so let's talk about it. So Gran Turismo is kind of based on a true story of Jan Mardenborough, who is a gamer turned professional race car driver after he enters into a competition. And it really is one of those kind of remarkable kind of real life stories that feels very ripe, a great fodder for the Hollywood treatment. I know this is a movie that I think for about a decade they've been trying to make some version of this story, and they finally did. And it turns out that it is good. I really enjoyed this movie. I think the movie itself isn't quite as like groundbreaking or unconventional as sort of the source material, like the actual story is. But I think this is a movie that does sort of merge compelling human drama with a lot of really exciting kind of race sequences to deliver just an uplifting sports drama. So let's get into this thing. So I think, like I said, kind of despite the unconventional journey of the protagonist in this film and in real life, the film itself kind of largely unfolds like a fairly conventional sports drama. Kind of all the standard tropes are present and accounted for in this film. Kind of, the rich, jerky rival. You have the grumpy old mentor who actually kind of has a heart of gold. You have the underdog that everyone counts out, and the pep talks and the last second photo finishes. Kind of most of the stuff that happens in this movie is things that you've likely seen before in a bunch of other kind of similar sports films. And guess what? At least to me, there's nothing wrong with that. I think the reason that the sports formula is kind of an often used template is because it works, because it makes us feel good. We know that the underdogs will win the state championship at the end of the movie, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the journey to get there and like, the character arcs are any less satisfying because of it. So while Gran Turismo may not necessarily break a whole lot of new ground, the narrative does unfold in a very compelling and I think competently kind of executed way that does blend sort of, I think, satisfying drama with kind of racing, thrilling racing sequences, and just a lot of uplifting kind of feel-good messaging. Director Neil Blomkamp is helms this movie, and his sort of career started off with a big bang. With some of his early films, and then it's kind of fizzled out since then. And I'm not convinced that Gran Turismo is going to be the movie that like puts him back on the podium and back in the conversation. But I do think this shows this is the best he's been in a long time, and it does show his just his high talent, his quality filmmaking abilities and storytelling sensibilities. One thing that does sort of set this movie a little bit apart from just your standard everyday basketball or football sports drama is sort of the video game element and like that basis of the story. And at least to me, I think the way that they incorporated that aesthetic, like the mechanics of the game, is clever. It is interesting. It's not overdone, where it just sort of feels like a video game, but they do. When they do use some of that and kind of incorporate the visuals into like the real life racing, at least to me, I think it was really effectively done. And this movie, it's fairly long. It's over 2 hours. I think about 2 hours and 15 minutes. But it never feels slow. The movie kind of constantly keeps momentum. There's always enough interesting things and kind of new takes on things to keep you interested. But perhaps most importantly, as someone who personally finds watching real life racing like the absolute utter peak of just boredom. There's nothing about racing that interests me. Yet I found the many racing scenes in Gran Turismo super engaging, super thrilling. Just the way that the kind of the camera work that they do and like the use of sound design and even just the way that it sort of it focuses on different kind of human the human element within the racing to distinguish it so it's not just sort of a repetitive cars continue going around. There is enough for each of these races, although largely the same, they do feel distinct enough and they are immersive. And even like in the theater that I saw this movie in, kind of throughout all the race scenes, the audience in the theater was like verbally cheering, and we'd all applaud at the end of a race, and very much a testament to how like immersive the experience of the racing is. As far as acting goes in this too, it's good across the board. Archie Madekwe, who I was not familiar with before this movie, it is very charismatic and like endearing in the lead role. Orlando Bloom is in this; he's a good character. But the stand-up performance to me is definitely David Harbour of like Stranger Things fame, who plays sort of a more jaded, cynical mentor for Jan's character. He adds some humor, although also some of the more emotional moments in the film, and kind of the relationship between him and Jan throughout this movie really does form the heart, kind of the emotional core of the film, and sort of the growing trust that the two characters have throughout their journey feels believable. It feels earned. As far as content to consider, things kind of going on the surface of this film, language, there is a fair amount of language in this movie. There is one very blatant, like, F bomb, and there might also be another one that is sort of muffled and like interrupted and like not fully articulated, but it seems like you know what's about to be said. And then there's just a fair amount of other kind of more minor profanity all throughout this. Words starting with S and D get used throughout, and also kind of the most unfortunate part to me is just there is fairly frequent kind of misuses of God or Jesus throughout. GD or JC kind of get used as like a profane cuss multiple times. So there is a fair amount of language in this movie. Violence, not much violence in this movie. There are a couple like car crashes and where characters get like bruised and bloody, but nothing concerning or gratuitous in that nature. And there is sort of like a tragic death that kind of happens off screen, and there's kind of the implications of that, but very little like violence depicted in camera. Sexuality, nothing really here either. There's a scene where Jan's brother like bursts into his bedroom, causing Jan to like slam his laptop closed and leading his brother to assume that he's watching porn, although in reality he's just watching like YouTube racing videos. And there is after Jan kind of has his first success on like the racing circuit, some of the other characters use like say he's popped his cherry. You kind of use that language to describe that, but nothing like sensual or any other kind of sexuality throughout this film. Maybe the only other thing as far as content, there is one moment where two characters are talking and they sort of speak about like their current circumstances as though they have manifested it into existence. Which again, the film itself doesn't really continue with any of the spiritual side of stuff, but that at least was noteworthy for me. As far as themes, kind of things going on beneath the surface of this film, there's a couple things going on that I found interesting. One of the main kind of most obvious themes in this film is just sort of conviction and commitment, which sort of gets woven all throughout of this story. Jan's sort of unwavering conviction that he wants to be a race car driver, despite the fact that he's never been behind the wheel of an actual race car, is sort of constantly questioned by those around him, kind of most profoundly or impactful for him with being his own family, and particularly his father, kind of pushes him to chase his dreams, but to do so in a realistic way and kind of more seeing the problems rather than the possibilities. And even more specific, like in the actual racing itself, sort of this motif of conviction, committing fully to what you're doing, kind of shows up several times. David Harbour's character, as he's mentoring Jan, kind of in going around the course, kind of continually pushes him and chides him that he can't hesitate. If he's going to kind of hesitate on the turn or to pass another car, then he might as well not get behind the wheel. That he just needs to fully commit to what he's doing. And obviously, religion doesn't show up really anywhere in this movie, but I do think there are some obvious parallels with this theme that Christians can affirm. I think even if like in Revelation 3, where it talks about either Christians, believers being hot or cold, not lukewarm. And Jesus often rebuked his followers, saying, "Hey, either follow me or don't, but don't kind of go through the motions." So I do think there are some themes as far as like commitment and conviction, following your convictions, that are relevant to Christians, even if the movie itself doesn't necessarily go that direction. Maybe the other kind of major theme in this movie is just sort of the blurring line between fiction and reality. Kind of the whole premise of this movie is that the kind of the virtual reality, the racing simulator that Jan has been participating in, that it's become so close, it so closely resembles real racing that he's able to almost seamlessly step into, from the digital space into the real world behind a real race car. And kind of in like the early stages of this movie, he's very much criticized for, that this isn't a game. This is real life. Wasn't it easier to race when you're just using a joey stick? But this is the real deal. But as the story progresses, it becomes increasingly clear that like not only does like the virtual experience has that prepared him for the real thing, but in many ways it's almost prepared him more than some of his rivals. This the amount of experience he's had on these courses and in these cars has actually sort of given him a leg up on the competition. And in some ways, that theme kind of unfolds almost like an extended commercial. This is a movie that is made by a video game company, so they obviously want you to really buy into the fact of how realistic some of these games are. But kind of beyond that, I do think that it does touch on a very relevant or raise some relevant questions just about that. What happens in a world where technology has advanced to the point that the distinction between real life and kind of fantasy, the digital world, is becoming harder and harder to distinguish. The movie itself, Gran Turismo, very much presents that in a positive light. That it sort of shows the good side of when that happens. Although I think all of us can pretty easily think that there's also a lot of negative aspects to that. So I do think the movie doesn't go super deep into that, but it is some relevant and interesting questions for Christians to kind of work through. So in the end, I really like this movie. I enjoyed this movie a lot. I don't think it's revolutionary by any means, but it is fun. It is well executed, and it is entertaining. That the kind of movie that does deliver kind of all the things that draw us to sports movies to begin with. I'm not sure if this is necessarily going to be among like the best movies of the year, but I do think this is one of the movies that I have enjoyed the most, at least up to this point. I think a lot of other people are going to enjoy this movie. It is sort of a feel-good movie that sends you out of the theater just feeling good, and probably also driving fast to your nearest store to buy the latest generation of a gaming console. But hey, let me know what you guys think when you guys see this movie. If you enjoyed it, if you maybe if you've had experience with the game and you enjoyed that aspect, or if you just were going to this to want to see a good sports movie, we'd love to have a conversation. So jump in the comment sections with that. If you haven't done so, I encourage you to subscribe to our channel, become a Collider. We'd just love to have you join with what we're doing here. We got live streams and movie reviews and a bunch of other fun stuff. So I hope you'll join us in that. But most of all, guys, thanks for watching. Stay safe and continue to collide with your world for Christ.